Small and independent presses have a reputation for releasing books that are risky or unsafe, at least when it comes to sales, and as a result, they tend to release a lot of innovative, experimental, translated, and just plain different books. They also tend to soak up these hidden gem authors who fall between the marketing quotas of the big publishing houses. And that is what, for me, makes a prize dedicated to small presses one worth following. The Republic of Consciousness Prize for Small Presses started in 2017 as a UK and Ireland-based book prize, but last year they expanded to include a second prize for US and Canadian presses. And if anybody from the Republic of Consciousness is watching, how about an Australian and New Zealand prize next year, please? Pretty please? The UK and Ireland longlist came out yesterday. The US and Canadian longlist came out a few days prior. And if you're super interested in these prizes, there are a couple of wonderful videos in my feed from Sarah of Eyes on Indie, who is discussing the North American prize, and Anna Marie from Actual Spinster, I love her channel name, who is discussing the British and Irish prize. I'll link their videos in the discussion for you. This is not a prize I'm going to read every book of, but what I really want to do is spend some time looking at every book on the long list, deciding which books are Scott books and reading them. And I figured a lot of you out there are probably in quite a similar camp. I'm going to start with the North American prize as it released its long list first, go through the 10 books on its long list, and then move over to the UK and Ireland prize and do the same. Crossstitch by Jasmina Barrara, translated from Spanish by Christina McSweeney. A debut novel of female friendship and coming of age. It was meant to be a trip of a lifetime. Miller, Satilla, and Dahlia, childhood friends, now college-aged, leave Mexico City for the England of the Clash and the Paris of Corbett. They anticipate the cafes and crushes, but not the early signs that they are steadily, inevitably changing. That feels like forever ago. Miller, now a writer and a new mother, has just published a book on needlecraft, an art form so long dismissed as women's work. But after learning Satella has drowned, Miller begins to sift through her old scrapbook, reflecting on their shared youth for the first time as a new wife and mother. What has come of all of the nights the three friends spent embroidering together in silence? Did she miss the signs that Satella needed help? 224 pages, but unfortunately this is a little bit difficult to get in Australia. Lots of websites saying it's sold out, one saying it's not released to the 2nd of April, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Grief, Friendship, Guilt. This is a book I'm definitely interested in, but not for $50 plus shipping to get it imported from overseas. I would love to read this book, but I think I'll wait until there's an ebook available for under $10 later in the year, or hope my library has it in before that. The long form by Kate Bridge. Helen and her young baby Rose are awake. It is the first thing on a new morning. They move, they rest, they communicate. Rose feeds. Thoughts and associations travel far beyond the remit of the front room in the rented flat, which they pace, and which, alive with them, continually become new. Their delicate balance is interrupted by the delivery of A History of Tom Young by Henry Fielding, a novel which describes itself semi-seriously as inventing the novel form for the very first time. As the morning progresses, Helen starts reading it. Indirectly, and each in their own distinct way, Helen and Rose start thinking about it. It claims the newness, its length, its essayist digression, its invitation to imagine old and new forms of life, writing, and experiences. At 480 pages, this sounds a little too plotless for me, although the reviews of it are ridiculously good, so I reserve the right to capriciously change my mind about this. Two Sherpas by Sebastian Martinez Daniel, translated from Argentinian Spanish by Jennifer Croft. I'm not quite sure at what point a language changes from a dialect to its own thing, but the translator Jennifer Croft was longlisted for the Woman's Prize last year, and I remember reading that she only translated Spanish books written by Argentinian authors because she was only confident with this particular dialect. A British climber has fallen from a cliffside in Nepal and lies inert on a ledge below. Two Sherpas kneel on the edge, stand, exchange the odd word, waiting for him to move, to make a decision, to descend. In those minutes, the world opens up to Kathmandu, a sun-bleached beach town on another continent, and the pages of Julius Caesar. Each breath is crystalline, and the whole world is visible from here. 271 pages. Now, I visited Nepal in my 20s, and I have a soft spot for anything Nepalese in my heart. I was aware of this book before it was already on my TBR. There's an ebook of this on Everand, formerly called Scribd, and for anybody who isn't a member of that service, there's a link in the description to get 2 months free, and it gives me a month free, so yay. Breaking and Entering by Don Gilmore. In the midst of the hottest summer on record, a woman tests the increasing tension between our social contracts and ourselves. At 49, Patrice Billing is rudderless. Her marriage is stale. Her relationship with her son Thomas is limited to text messages, hostile haikus that he sends from university, and she is the primary caregiver for her mother, who is in the early stages of dementia. She has a complicated relationship with her older sister Ariel, with whom she carries ongoing arguments in her head. B laments the loss of momentum she remembers feeling in her early 30s, when she and everybody she knew was busy buying houses, having children, and renovating kitchens. Now she is reflecting on her life, worried about her inability to memorize a simple yoga sequence, and about the fact that she enjoys the idea of many things more than the actual things themselves: teaching, reading, sex. When B finds that she has both a talent and a passion for picking locks, the sense of anticipation that has been missing from her life returns. Breaking into other people's houses is something she's good at. She is a quick study, subtle, discreet, and never greedy. It's a dangerous hobby that makes her feel alive, and so she begins the guilty analysis of other people's lives and eventually her own. 240 pages. This sounds fantastic. And I continue arguments in my head long after they've actually finished, and the idea of somebody feeling so lost that they turn to petty crime is staggeringly relatable for some strange reason. Audio and ebook available on Scribd. This one is getting read. Your Love Is Not Good by Joanna Hedva. At an otherwise unforgettable party in Los Angeles, a queer Korean-American painter spots a woman who instantly controls the gorgeous and distinctly and utterly white, the center of everyone's attention. Is it just me, or does that sentence not actually make sense? Haunted into adulthood by her Korean father's abandonment of his family, as well as the spectre of her beguiling, abusive white mother, the painter finds herself caught in the perfect trap. She wants Hannah, or wants to be her, or to sully her, or destroy her, or consume her, or some confusion of all the above. Since she's an artist, she will use her art to get close to Hannah. Begin a series of paintings with her new muse as model. As for Hannah, what does she want? Her whiteness seems sometimes as cruel as a new sheet of paper. When the painting of Hannah becomes a hit, resulting in the artist's first sold-out show, she resolved to bring her new muse with her to Berlin to continue her work and her seduction. Just when the painter is on the verge of her long sought-after breakthrough, a petition started by a black performance artist begins making the rounds in the art community, calling for the boycott of major museums and art galleries for their imperialist and racist practices. Torn between her desire to support the petition, to be successful, and to possess Hannah, the painter and her reality become more unstable and disorienting. Unwilling to cut loose any one of her warring ambitions, yet unable to accommodate them all. Is it any wonder so many artists self-destruct so spectacularly? Is it perhaps just a bit exciting to think that she could too? 320 pages. I love a book exploring the conflicts between success and ethics. That piques my interest. I also don't hate a book about obsession. I am concerned the reviews on this are all over the place. Also, is it just me, or is the writing of that synopsis a bit yuck? So what I'm going to do with this one is wait for a few reviews from people I trust to come out with to see if this is good, bad, or otherwise. Landscapes by Christine Lay. Set in a near future that is fraught with ecological collapse and geopolitical upheaval, Landscapes explores memory, empathy, and art as an instrument for recollection and renewal. In a ruinous country house, in a now barren English countryside, decimated by heat and drought, and in a dusty library damaged by earthquakes and flood, Penelope archives what remains of the estate's once noticeable, now diminished art collection. As she delves into the objects and images, she also keeps a diary of her final months in the dilapidated estate that has been her home for 2 decades and a refuge for those who have been displaced by disaster. Out of necessity, Penelope and her partner Aidan have sold the house, and with its scheduled demolition comes the pressing task of building the archive. But with it also comes the impending arrival of Aidan's brother Julian, who will return to have one final look at his childhood home. Penelope suffered at the hands of Julian 22 years ago during a brief but violent relationship, and as his visit looms large over her, she finds herself unable to tamp down the past in her effort to build a possible, if uncertain, future. 296 pages, cli-fi, dystopian, trauma, violent relationships. Looking back, I'm interested, but I'm not top tier interested. I want to read it, but I'm not rushing. A couple of poor reviews, that might change my mind. A couple of good reviews might put it to the top of my TBR. The Birthday Party by Laurent Mauvignier, translated from French by Daniel Leven-Becker. Buried deep in rural France, little remains of the isolated hamlet of the 3 lonely girls, save a few houses and a curiously assembled quartet. Patrice Burgon, inheritor of his family's farm, his wife Marion, their daughter Ida, and their neighbour Christine, an artist. While Patrice plans a surprise for his wife's 40th birthday, inexplicable events start to disrupt the hamlet's quiet existence. Anonymous, menacing letters, an unfamiliar car rolls up the driveway, and as night falls, strangers stalk the house, unleashing a nightmarish chain of events, a gripping tale of violent interruptions of the past into the present. This is 454 pages long. This was on the International Booker Prize last year, and I've seen some really good reviews of it, but I haven't read it yet. It didn't interest me enough, but these positive reviews make me feel like I'm missing out on something amazing. Logman by Ebru Ojen, translated from Turkish by Aaron Aji and Salin Göksu. Logman tells, on its surface, the domestic tale of a Kurdish family living in a small village on a desolated plateau at the foot of the snow-capped mountains in Turkey's Van province. Virtually every aspect of the family's life is dictated by the government, from their exile to the country's remote easternmost region to being sequestered in the grim teacher's lodging. When Selma's husband walks out one day, he leaves in his wake a storm of resentment between his young children and a mother reluctant to parent them. At 194 pages, there's an ebook available on Scribd. Kurdish family in that Van region which borders Iran. Family drama. I'm sold. I want to read this one. The Box by Mandy Susan Wong. In a dark and crooked lane in an unnamed city where it never ceases to snow, a small white box falls from a coat pocket. It is made of paper strips woven tightly together. There is no apparent way to open it without destroying it. What compels a passing witness, a self-described anthrophobe not inclined to engage with other people, to pick up the box and chase after the stranger who dropped it? At 264 pages, this is quite an easy no for me. It sounds very pretentious. I'll keep an open mind, and if people say otherwise, I might try it. The Sorrows of Others by Ada Zhang. Set in China and America in the generations after the Cultural Revolution, The Sorrows of Other is a dazzling collection about people confronted with being outsiders as immigrants, as revolutionaries, and even often within their own family. 160 pages and a collection of short stories. This is another no from me. I am not a short story fan. I would probably be leaning towards yes if this was a novel, and as with every book I say no to, I reserve the right to change my mind. That's the North American prize over, and it's time to turn our attentions to the Irish and UK prize. Suma Koka by Ventura Amalira, translated from Catalan by Douglas Soutal, tells the story of a young boy as he lives through the build-up and the outbreak of Spanish Civil War. Blending fact and fiction, legend and history, Suma Koka is a tour de force, an explosion of language and literature. It is one of the most outstanding, groundbreaking works of art ever written in the Catalan language. The book begins with the discovery of a tattered text belonging to an anti-historian, Peter White O'Sullivan, and it is his text that the reader is reading. He tells the story of the creation of Anamorphous, formerly Protomorphous, as he begins his life as a spermatozoon, then a fetus, before being born into the village of Pole. From here we follow his life as he grows up and witnesses, often from a child's point of view, some of the most important events of the 20th century. 500 pages of hell no. The publisher's description doesn't even make sense here. This sounds like one of these overly complex novels that is just trying to be difficult and not actually saying very much. You know, James Joyce. Of Catalan Men by Ana Paula Maia, translated from Brazilian Portuguese by Zoe Perry. Now, if I'm saying American Spanish, I have to say Brazilian Portuguese. Animals go mad and men die, accidentally or not, at a slaughterhouse in an impoverished, isolated corner of Brazil. In a landscape worthy of Cormac McCarthy, the river runs septic and sludgy with blood. Edgar Wilson makes the sign of the cross on the forehead of a cow, then stuns it with his mallet. He does this over and over and over again. The stunt operator at the Mr. Milo's slaughterhouse, reliable, responsible, quietly dispatching cows and following orders, wherever that may take him. It is important to calm the cows, especially now that they seem so unsettled. One runs headlong into the side of a barn. 22 more hurl themselves off the side of a cliff. Bronco Gill, their foreman, thinks it's a jaguar or a wild boar. Edgar Wilson does not. But what is certain is that there is something in this desolate corner of Brazil driving men and animals to murder and madness. At 99 pages, South American literary horror, and this is really reminding me of Tender is the Flesh, and I'm sure you can see why. I am sure that this is a very different novel though. This is definitely going to be a book that I either love or hate, but at 99 pages it feels a little bit like a free hit, and it's another one where the ebook is on Scribd. May the Tigress Grieve for You by Emmeline Malfato, translated from French by Lorna Scott Fox. Rural Iraq during the war against the Islamic State. A pregnancy out of wedlock. The young woman knows her fate is sealed. In crystalline prose, May the Tigress Grieve You enters the minds of all protagonists before and after death. Fragments of the legend of Gilgamesh, the hero who carries along the memories of the country and its people, punctuate the family members' short monologue, spaced with the mythical voice of the Tigress River, who has seen it all. Inspired by her experience of Iraq's complex reality and brutal wars, Malfato delivers an uncompromising yet compassionate insight into a rigid society ruled by father and son, a world in which life matters less than honor. 80 pages. This is a hell yes. Except it's really hard to get a copy, and $40 for an 80-page book, that's literally $1 every 2 pages. Seems a little steep to me. I'm going to request my library gets this one and hope that there is a cheaper copy or ebook that comes out soon. Truth or Dare by So Mayer. Cornish mermaids take to the football pitch to protest warming seas. Trans students in Manchester searching for the perfect dick accidentally warp the fabric of space time. England's worst program comes from York's particle collider, powered by bread and gender energy. On Bournemouth Beach, a storm delivers an ancestor across oceans of time to sire a drowning descendant. The devil stands a drink at London's famous gay pub, the Black Cap, while Artemis, in the guise of Joan of Arc, roams a life or death night in East Sussex. 272 pages of short stories. I basically hate fictional descriptions of quantum mechanics. I love physics and I love quantum stuff, but fictionalize it and turn it into that weird description that we just heard. It's magical realism, the worst of genres. And the science side of thing is so rarely done well or with understanding. I love fiction that explores what scientific advancements could mean for the average person, but very rarely does that topic get explored the way I want. Also, this is short stories, so this is a very strong no. I'm sorry. The End of August by Yu Murray, translated from Japanese by Morgan Giles. In 1930s Japanese-occupied Korea, Lee Woo-cheol was a running prodigy and a contender for the upcoming Tokyo Olympics, but he would have had to run under the Japanese flag. Nearly a century later, his granddaughter is living in Japan and training to run a marathon herself. She summons Korean shamans to hold an intense, transcendent ritual to connect with Lee Woo, when his ghost appears alongside those of his brother Lee Woo-gun and their young neighbour, who was forced to become a comfort woman to Japanese soldiers stationed in China during World War II. She must uncover their stories to free their souls. What she discovers is at the heart of this sweeping, majestic novel about a family that endures death, love, betrayal, war, political upheaval, and ghosts, both vengeful and wistful. At 720 pages, I actually had this one out from the library before. I think I returned it because, firstly because I had too many books and I needed to return one or two of them. And this one was a bit long, but mostly because it was September already and I didn't read it at the end of August, which I know is a stupid reason, but it felt very true to the arbitrariness of the books I pick sometimes. Sometimes I wonder, how am I meant to know if a book is a good one until I begin it? So maybe this is a sign that I shouldn't have returned it then and I should prioritize it now. But, I'll probably get it out from the library and then decide to return it because it's April. Avenues by Train by Farai Mudzingwa. When 7-year-old Jeswa witnesses a tragic incident involving a train and the death of his closest boyhood friend in his hometown miner's drift, he is convinced that his life is haunted. Now in his mid-20s, Jesda is a down-and-out electrician moving to Harare in the hopes that he will escape the darkness and superstition of the small town. But living in the shadowy, restless atmosphere of the avenues, with its mysterious pools of water rising under the Masara tree, he is tormented by the disappearance of his sister and their early encounters with ancient spirits and the shape-shifting power of the Nujzu and the vengeful Ngozi. To move forward, he must stop running away and confront the traumas of his past. 304 pages. I'm really interested in the first half of this description, but when it starts to talk about vengeful shapeshifters, I start to feel uncomfortable. Weirdly, if it was a fantasy novel that explored grief and was written in a literary way, I would be super interested. But it's a literary novel about grief that has fantasy elements, which makes me feel queasy. Definitely leaning towards no, but I'm a little bit undecided. My Work by Olga Ravin, translated from Danish by Sophie Hershey-Smith and Jennifer Russell. In this radical, funny, and mercilessly honest novel about motherhood, Anna is utterly lost after giving birth. She and her family move to the unfamiliar snowy city of Stockholm. Anxiety threatens to completely engulf the new mother, who obsessively devours online news and buys clothes she can't afford. To avoid sinking deeper into a depression, Anna forces herself to read and write. My Work is a novel about the unique and fundamental experience of motherhood. It mixes fiction, essay, poetry, memoir, and letters to explore the thorny, twisted ties between pregnancy, maternity, capitalism, work, art, individuality, and literature. At 416 pages, this sounds fantastic. Although the blending of different forms makes it sound a little bit experimental, and I think it might be a good idea just to wait for 1 or 2 reviews to confirm it is as good as I think it might be. Out of Earth by Sheila Samiotto, translated from Brazilian Portuguese by Laura Gramason and Sophie Lewis. Following 4 generations of female characters as they navigate the hardship of life in the parched landscape of the Brazilian Cerrado. Male figures are peripheral, but also revealed as the origin of much of the suffering in this novel, generating from the women a kind of exile not only in relation to the land, but to some of their sense of self. This is a groundbreaking feminist work, a bracingly modernist fable, reminiscent of Emma McBride's A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. 252 pages. I was all in until the comparison with A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. I'm going to say it's a no. I really didn't enjoy the style that McBride wrote in. It's very much a love it or hate it style. Barcode by Christina Toth, translated from Hungarian by Peter Sherwood. 15 beautifully written and highly sensual short stories. Each story, apart from one, is told with poetic intensity and intimacy from a young, unnamed female narrator's point of view. Whether about childhood acquaintances, school camps and trips, and deceit in love, they are all set against the backdrop of Hungarian's socialist era and in its declining years. What sets this book apart, however, is another level in the work as a whole. The stories are carefully strung, like jewels in a necklace, along metaphorical lines, as in the title of the collection and the subtitle of the pieces, which nearly all include the word for line or bar in Hungarian. The losses, disappointments, and tragedies, great and small, recounted here, offer nuanced mirrorings of the female soul and linger long in the memory. At 226 pages, normally short stories are a straight no for me, but there is something about this that makes me think that it might work as a whole, that it might be interconnected. The Zeke Amron by Maxim Nazak, translated from Belarusian by Jim and Ella Dingley. Zeke Amron derives from the Russian word Zeke, which means something along the general lines of prisoner. The stories found themselves outside of the prison walls and were sent directly to Jim Dingley, who previously translated 2 books from Belarus from Scotland Street Press. Dingley immediately sent the manuscript to Scotland Street Press. Its arrival was a huge would its publication endanger Zach's life or agitate successfully for his release. By September 2021, this brilliant lawyer was already resentenced to 10 years in a penal colony in the north of Belarus. His wife and sister urged us to go ahead with its publication. What a cool backstory. Inspired by the Decameron taking the same form, 100 short stories, charting 100 days of prison in Belarus today. Banality and brutality vie with the human ability to overcome oppression. The tone is ironic and the humour dry. The stories bear witness to resistance and self-assertion and the genuine warmth and appreciation of fellow prisoners. At 265 pages, that means the average story length is just 2.5 pages. And while that backstory is really fascinating, I'm sorry, this is a no from me. I'd like to say a big thank you to my wonderful patrons for all of their support. That is all 20 books. I hope you found a few new books from either or both long lists to add to your ever-expanding TBRs. Happy reading. Bye-bye.